I got a lot of questions on how I made my bohemian style chunky tassels. They are quite large. They are much bigger than my hand. They're very long. They are very chunky indeed. These three were made with the same system of using a jump ring or double banded key ring, as you can see here, as the base, which gives us a narrower profile at the top, versus this one over here, which I made. As you can see, it's rounder here, and that's because it has a wire that's double fed and then hidden inside of this bead here. But it makes this top very long and stiff, whereas these ones here have a whole lot more flexibility depending on how you make them. So let's get started. In order to make these tassels, you are going to need some wire. I haven't straightened my wire. This is my second time making this video, so here is the piece of wire that we're going to be using. My cat jumped up and knocked my camera off. It is precariously perched because my craft room is not set up. So you'll need a piece of wire, some wire cutters, a large jump ring or double banded key ring, as I have here, and a stack of fun fabrics that you can use. Now I say fabric because I actually do use fabric and ribbon. I'll use anything I have. So we will start by laying out all of our pieces, and I like to mix them up as I go, size, color. They don't all have to be perfectly centered, but I do like to start with a really wide piece on the bottom. It helps to keep it a little bit tidier later on. So these fabric pieces are just scraps, and you can see I'm not worried about any of this extra fluff. If you don't like that fluff, you can absolutely take a lighter and run it down the edge of that, and it will take some of that out. I also like to mix up my textiles, in that I like to use yarn. Now these are variegated. This is a same spool of yarn, skein. It was just a variegated skein of yarn. So that and some nice little strings, then throw on some more richly colored fabrics. This one is one of my favorites. It's just so special looking. It has so much texture in it. And then I'm going to want to put in a couple things that sparkle in here as well. That is Nicodemus, who is unhappy that I am not giving him all of my attention right now. So hopefully this time he won't knock over the camera. But any kind of sparkle that you can add in is always good. I like to use sequined bits in there because I really think that they add just a lot in the overall appearance. And I do kind of like my sequin to be close to the top, but I do like it masked because those little bits of sequin want to puff up and bend. So I'm going to grab this roughly in the center, and I'm going to give it a twist. Now the reason I twist is because that makes it much easier for me to feed it through and keep it in the same pattern or order in which I had stacked it. So now what I want to do is flip it over so I can see that gold ribbon that I stuck on the bottom. I always like to pay attention to whichever one I had on the bottom originally. This is the time to fix when you fold this over. If you don't like the way something is laying, now is the time to fix it. Like this green, I don't want all of this green sequin to be on one side, so I'm going to crisscross it with this gold one so that I can make sure that I have some sequin on both sides. And like I said, I like a piece to be right over the top of anything sequin. So I'm gonna pull that black one over the top of this green one here so that it can help to hold it all down. All right, now that I have that, I'm going to pull it nice and flat. I'm going to take another piece of twine. Now I do this so that I have something secure holding this in place before I attempt to wrap with my wire. If you want to have a go and just do it with the wire, you absolutely can. Nothing's stopping you. But I like to start by taking and making a loop. So I've just crossed this over itself. I hope you can see that there. And where this piece is on the top and this piece coming up from the back is behind, I'm going to set that on top and hold that with my thumb up towards the top of my loop. I'm going to bring this about somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch below the edge, and I'm going to pull that loop around. And when I do this, what that gives me is a really stable base that has secured my ring in place and my fabric. This is your last minute chance. I didn't like the way that red one got pulled over so far. So I'm going to wrap this about 3 or 4 times, and hopefully I stay in frame during all of this because it definitely helps. So now this piece I'm going to take and I'm going to feed it through that loop, and I'm going to use this one to pull that up and under. And once it gets up and under, I essentially have a knot there, but I want to secure that knot. So I'm going to tie this over the top. And pull nice and tightly. And I'm going to do one more for safekeeping. Now you could absolutely stop here, throw some little beads onto the ends of these bits so that you have some nice dangles in there, or you can take it one step further and wrap it in wire. Now with a copper wire, you can absolutely do it in the exact same way where you create a loop and pull it through, but I find that that gets to be a little bit tricky if you don't have as soft a wire. So what I like to do instead is feed a little piece of my wire under that knot if I can. Be careful not to poke yourself. It does hurt if you get it underneath your fingernail. So I can feel it here, but I can't show it to you because I can't see it. At any rate, I'm going to pinch that down with my thumb and give this a wrap. Now, what I want to pay attention to for this is going over that yellow because I want to hide it. So now I'm going to pull this nice and tightly with each wrap to cover up that yellow. And when you get it close to the front, you want to get one of these bands to be just a tiny bit loose so that I can go under it. And this is where those sequins tend to get in the way. That's why I like to have them covered by something else. I'm going to use my other pair of pliers to give that a nice hard pull. And then I want to angle it down swiftly, a nice sharp angle down. And then with the rest of this, I'm going to make a pretty little coil. So I'm going to start by getting that first little bit nice and tight. Once you have that first loop, that is not tight at all. Once you have that first loop, you can just pinch it flat and keep wrapping. Let me try to do this quickly for you guys. This is a really soft wire, so technically I can do this one just with my fingers. But if you have a firmer wire, you will need the pliers for that. And then I'm going to give it a nice little press to lock it in place. Now it's ready for me to add on whatever beads or jewels I would like to embellish the heck out of it. We're going to set this one aside and I'm going to show you the other method where you use 2 wires. So for the other method, you will need 2 pieces of wire, unless you decide to leave it just tied off with your string. And and one of them only needs to be about 4 inches long. We're going to quickly make a pile of all of these ribbons. And I'm not too worried about them this time just because I don't want this video to be too long. I just want you to see how it gets done. I like to make sure though that I do spread out those chunkier bits with those softer bits. So making sure to disperse my yarn in different heights, although giving most of my sparkly bits right on the top or my really textured bits. So for this one, I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to put it underneath at roughly the center, and I'm going to pull it up on itself and pull these down. And once I have that up, I'm going to give this a good twist. And then I'm going to trim off that excess. After you trim off that excess, you may notice there's a little tiny piece that wants to stick out. That's what your pliers are for. Give it a nice little twist one more time into itself. And this way I can build the rest of that tassel off of this. You could do this with a string, I suppose, but it's best if you're going to use a string instead of wire for this step that you use a wax-coated string, like used for bookbinding, or even dental floss will work really nicely because it won't slip as much. So now we want to make that nice knot so that this one's going to be nice and round at the top. You can see that here. So we're going to take that's twine, and I'm going to fold it over itself. I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to wrap. Because I have less to work with here, I'm just going to give it one quick wrap. It's put through the hole and pulled up. Now, before I pull it super tightly, I'm going to take advantage of this moment to adjust any of these pieces so that they look more round and even. Once I have it where I want it, I'm going to pull this up and through and then tie it off. At this point, this piece is really short because I cut it too short, so I'm just going to trim it off. Since I'm going to be wrapping this with wire, that's not going to be the knot that's holding it all together, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to string my wire through. Let's see if I can get it so that you guys can see it this time. So there you can see there's some wire. If you would like to, you can also take this opportunity to give it a little curl so you can make sure that there's never going to be anything sharp for anyone to get pricked on. I'm going to start wrapping with my pink wire around and around. Now what I found is that when I do this really round one, after I get 2 or 3 slips in, I find the wire is pulled tighter than the thread, so I can go ahead and remove that because I don't need it anymore. Like I said, if you wanted to try just with the wire, you absolutely could. It does, however, get a little bit fiddly, so I like to give myself that extra bit to work with. We're going to wrap this one more time. You can see we have a really nice sort of jellyfish look there. We have that nice bulbous ball. It gets narrower at the corseting for the wire, and then it pops up beautifully again at the bottom. I'm going to take, I apparently have a knot in my wire. That is very wrinkly, so I'm just going to trim that off. And I'm going to feed this back through one of those coils. If you can find that loop that you created at the beginning, you can absolutely go through that one again. But I'm going to use my pliers to grab this and pull it nice and tightly. And now for this one, I'm going to fold it up and then I'm going to make that coil. You can get really creative here with how you like your wire wrapping to be, or if you just want to make it a little simple loop. I like the way it looks when you have the little coiled wire on there. So we're going to get this one going. I have found that using flat pliers like this allows me to really hold on and keep that coil really flat. But it also gives a nice focal point to the center of my tassel. So there you have it. For something like this, you just want to make sure that you do have a bead big enough to put over the top. Trim off some of these crazy excess threads. I have one here, but the hole is much too big. I would need a smaller one for this, but the idea is you want it to make sure that it'll go over that double banded wire. So you can always test that out with a variety of beads, and then you just make a little loop at the top after you've put a couple beads on it, much like this one here. So put a couple beads, I made a little loop at the top, added a hook, and we're all done. I hope that you liked this video and that it clarified some things for you and made sense. And there are the tassels that we made. I hope you guys have a great evening. We'll see you on the next time.